Equifax breach from 2017. We're going to go ahead and start with an overview of what happened, which is Equifax is one of the three largest consumer credit reporting agencies in the US. And this incident occurred due to a patch not being upgraded or released for Apache Struts, a web application software tool the Equifax and other corporations were using. So what happened? The vulnerability was for an update that had to be released within 48 hours of March 8th, 2017. This alert was sent from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Computer and Regency Readiness Team. And the vulnerability was exploited, and over 147 million U.S. citizens were affected. Their data was stolen, and over 15 million British citizens, and then about 20,000 Canadian citizens. And it cost Equifax over $600 million in repairs, legal fees, recovery plans, and all that. What was stolen? How can it affect victims? This breach had access to confidential private data like full names, social security numbers, birthdates, addresses, and driver's license numbers. And we all know this combination of data can result in many bad actors using it for accessing bank accounts, accessing healthcare information, committing insurance fraud under their name, or even just selling that information on the dark web. What contributed the most to the breach? I would say not double checking their work, which is a common mistake for people, as everyone should be double checking their work, proofreading, everything. And then I would say the lack of proper risk management, the lack of urgent patching, ignoring that vulnerability, poor communication, no risk avoidance plan. Just a lot of bad moves from Equifax team. And if they just had a proper risk avoidance plan instead of just accepting that vulnerability when they first had a suspicious activity, they would have saved 600 million plus in dollar amount. The root cause, I would say miscommunication, not releasing the patch, obviously, or the update, and the lack of a defensive plan, not using defensive methods like isolation, encryption, or limiting access to that data until a proper patches are released at the very least. Missteps. The biggest misstep would be in the response of the whole incident. And NIST CSF has a great response strategy. And then they could have used also offensive strategies. So I'll go over the NIST and how it could have helped. So first is the functions of NIST, which is identify, seeing what you need to protect, what kind of data. And this kind of data is actually legally bound to be protected in the sense of cybersecurity. There's policies, guidelines, and regulations to be set. And depending on where you're located, it varies in plans. And if you're international, there's even more you have to go through. And then protecting that data, obviously, like I just said, detecting is very important for a corporation. It's a very important function. It helps you find the vulnerabilities through monitoring, investigating, analyzing, and then when you identify those vulnerabilities. And then response, which is what brought us here. It is the epitome of cybersecurity planning, preparation. They would have saved hundreds of millions if they just had a plan, or if they were more prepared. They could have mitigated the vulnerability. They could have shut down services and made a patch when they realized it wasn't released. They could have chose to they could have used the first suspicious activity as a ground floor for what could have happened, and used the offensive strategy, red hatting or penetration testing, to find the size of the vulnerability, what kind of data would have been compromised, what access they would have had through that vulnerability. That would have really helped. What would you do differently as a head of incident report team? I'll say, according to the IBM data, over 90% of cyber attacks are made possible because of human error, which means training. That is very important for the whole organization to avoid phishing, spear phishing, all that. An audit system log would have really helped keeping track of all that data that was accessed, unauthorized access, and stolen, basically. And I believe that was in a couple months around May when they first got a hint of an attack, and they seem to have ignored it. And then there's also different types of audit logs. Just an automated log would have been perfect. They just had to monitor it, read over it, and let their management know how that's going. Steps to prevent or lessen the impact of the breach. Here, I'd like to go over the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. CIA triad is basically a checklist that helps determine how to keep that data from being stolen or accessed when they're not authorized. Very simple method of defense. And then, of course, IAM, Identity Access Management, is a great defensive method. And a robust IAM design helps prevent disruption, address redundancy, and backup. It also supports confidentiality, integrity, authenticity, and non-repeat. And the purpose of IAM is to give access to whoever needs it and only what they need. It's basically an enhanced POLP, principle of least privilege, and I'm very supportive of that defensive plan. I think every corporation has to have an IAM management team. And then, of course, defense in depth. They can have encrypted data, biometrics, just add more and more layers of defense to keep them from being accessed. Helpful tools and defense in depth. I'll go over SIEM, which is Security Information and Event Management System. It's a great tool for automated security, event collection, and threat detection. This would have been great use early on when they were first being exploited. And then there's also firewalls and antivirus, which are classic defensive method layers. There's also FIM, file integrity monitoring, that takes cryptographic hash to fingerprint files. DLP, data loss prevention, which is a great SOC tool. Security Operations Center. Oh, sorry, I was blanking. That can allow access or actively block access. Also passively send alerts. Key lessons. I mean, I'm a huge fan of POLP. If you don't have an IAM, it's a great basic layer of defense. And then tools, assessment tools, I think would have been a great help right here with Equifax to determine the size of the attack, the size of their defensive plan, and the readiness of their response plan, which I don't think was very prepared. And then the four stages of dealing with cybersecurity incident: assessment, prevention, monitoring, and response. Now we'll wrap it up. I want to say that cybersecurity is a negative goal, which is very hard to fight against. You never know what the bad actors will come up with, what strategies they'll use to attack you with. And that way, you always have to use zero trust. Trust nobody, trust nothing. Always authenticate, always be prepared. And I'll touch up on third-party risk management, which is a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. It's a great turn of phrase for that. Because if vendors are accessing that data that we're keeping safe, but bad actors are stealing it from the vendors, then it's not very viable, it's not very safe. And lastly, always double check your work. They could have released that patch or kept track that they didn't. And that's why logging and monitoring is so important. They would have caught it ahead of time.